this computer. Okay.
And we got it. All right.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, I wondered whether a good way to start, and especially if Janice Marie might view this recording or Eldora, to just review the bidding of how we got to where we are now, at least from my memory. Would that be okay?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I think it makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm the theme coordinator for the conference. Barbro is the chair. And because we were both involved and connected and invested in this panel, we kind of started working on this together and started recruiting you guys with different conversations that were one-on-one conversations. And as we continued to talk about the panel, my initial idea had been that it might be in two parts and that this might only be half the time. This would be a look back panel, and then there would be a look ahead panel. And I was thinking about getting people from the Commission on Institutional Change and et cetera, some current leaders. But after some conversation, we felt like that was more elaborate than this needed to be, and that there was plenty of forward thinking in this group. And as our conversation evolved about the four of us plus others, and we started to talk about others being involved, we began to think about how to use the full 2 hours that we have, an hour and 45 minutes. And so one area of uncertainty remained once it was clear that Janice Marie was willing to be involved. Leon, I think, brought forward, is it Eldora or Elnora, Leon?
Elnora.
Elnora, yes. Elnora's name as somebody who could be involved as an active layperson that had years of activism and involvement leading up to 1993. And so there was, in my mind, some uncertainty about whether she was going to be a guest or a participant. And right now, unless there's been private conversations about this panel, I think she's still on hold as far as whether she's been clearly invited to attend. At the end of our last group conversation, there was a suggestion, I suggested probably that I could draft an outline for how we might proceed in terms of a form for the discussion. And that was sent around to all of you. And out of that, there were a couple of other conversations, which just, I think, led to a little more uncertainty about whether something that formal and structured was a good idea. And at one point, because of the conversations in email, Barbro and I started to wonder whether if there were 4 people who were involved in this panel, including Elnora, all of whom were Black and all of whom had perspectives on the past and the future, maybe that was a better panel than having us involved. And maybe the white people should step back and have this be a conversation among the rest of you. Mel didn't think that was such a good idea when he and I talked. And so in a way, I feel like we're back to square one of trying to think about how, if there are 6 of us involved in this conversation, how it gets structured, who moderates, and what the key questions are. And I feel fine about where we've come to in this personally. I've enjoyed the conversations privately and in the group. So that's, I think, where we are. Maybe anybody else think I missed
Wayne,
anything?
Yes, I think it was Janice who had the idea of Honora, not me, inviting her, and through Barbro but Elnora has been involved, or the family has been involved in several ways, in the whole social justice piece, particularly around the name at that time. But it was from Janice's suggestion, not mine.
Thank you.
Yes, and
I'm not saying I'm opposed. Okay, no.
initially, that idea was to invite Elnora as a guest.
Right.
That's how it started. And in our meeting, I think I heard the idea that she could be a great panelist because of her involvement, the whole family's involvement over the years. And that came from both you, Leon, and you, Mel.
Mhm.
So that's where we are.
At one point in a private conversation with Mel, I suggested that maybe Mel should be the moderator of the panel. I mean, we haven't established a moderator role, somebody who sort of manages the time, calls on people, or holds up questions for discussion. And so that's still an open question. And then whether we do it in sort of going around with everybody getting airtime on some questions, or whether it's better to just be more free flowing and see who wants to talk when, with one of us probably playing a moderator role of calling on people, I suppose. With 6 at the same time live, I think you need some kind of moderation.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yes.
I think the other element, just to go back, is that I think what I was sparked by was, again, I'm going back to the powerful dialogue I know we all had a few years ago and how that was powerful, but also because we're particularly dealing with ministers in this situation and thinking about the fact, talk about a transformation. We think, Barbro, you were a layperson who's now one of our leading ministers.
Yes.
Leon is a layperson who became the first layperson president.
Yeah.
I mean, talk about radical change at the time. And there was a whole lot in between that happened. And so when I got into that, I was saying that go back to 93, and the ball was in a context, a lot of work for the previous 15 or 20 years to get to the point where we actually were taking seriously anti-racism and a need to address it. And it was also the time of the male-female dynamic within leadership. And so I was trying to show, sorry, I'm gonna let this go. And so what I was trying to get back is that we didn't know all this at the time. We kind of knew it, but we didn't know what all it meant and how that kind of played out. So I was simply saying I didn't want to just focus on the ball, but the ball was a critical piece of what triggered and helped us figure out a lot of things. So I was trying to give it a context, if that makes some sense. That's really what I was trying to get at. And to reflect back on it, what did we really learn? Because we can look back now and see some of the stages and things that happened. So Wayne, I was trying to move into how do we build up to the women panel and look into the future, which I heard you talking about, to say that we kind of lay a more of a continuum or a spectrum of what our learning skills options were along the way. And so did we kind of lay out some of that framework in part of what we were doing and get people thinking about that. And then I was hearing Barbro raise the issue of, well, I'd like to hear some of the ministers and others really reflecting as well. And I was saying, I would too. I would really know with some of the folks, what are some of the learnings that some of us really can look back. I know what you guys say, and I see significant changes. And I think you're honest. That's why I said, no, it can't just be Black panel, because the real shift is.
Oops, Mel.
Yeah, he froze.
Mel.
I'm live myself, so I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, you're back.
You're back now.
The real shift, that was where you froze.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was a real shift in terms of for white ministers.
Yes.
And the two of you have modeled that in my way of thinking. So no, I wasn't willing to say that you should not be part of it. I was excited that you catalyzed it in the beginning. I was just trying to broaden the framework a little bit.
Yeah.
Make any sense to you all?
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing that came to me when Leon, Sophia, and Bill Sinkford did the interim presidency. I was reflecting back. I've talked about this before, but I think it makes a lot of sense for me in the context of what you're saying, Mel. So in the 67, 68, race was a big issue, and there's a walkout. And my minister at that time, David McPherson, in 93, was present there, and I sat with him in the when Hope read the letter. And he went immediately back 25 years to the walkout and said, "Oh my God," something like that.
We're gonna blow up.
"They're going to blow up again. There will be a walkout." And then I went searching for Leon and ended up in that group of VIPs. and and some people walked out, but it was not a staged walkout, and it was not a split. We somehow were able to stay where we were and do the racism day that Mark Morrison Reed had planned. And then 25 years later, or almost 25 years later, there's another blow up over racism, race. And the board of the UUA appoints 3 Black individuals, 2 male and 1 female. And it was like, for me, that was so powerful, because before I thought I had lost my faith. I thought I had lost Unitarian Universalism. And when the announcement came, my reaction was, "Oh my God, we are saved." We're moving forward. Although it's taken big steps over a long, or small steps rather, over long periods, almost generational periods of first blowing up totally and then not so much, but maintaining ourselves, and then big change happened. So I just wanted to add that. For me, that's critical in this sort of thinking back.
Sometimes I wish that Bill, Sophia, and I had taped our conversation as 3 people of color, put in charge of this mess.
Yeah.
You mean your private conversations or your public ones? Because you did one public one, I think, at least.
Private conversations that I wish we would have recorded. My comment was one of Mayor Stokes taking over Cleveland.
Right.
And on one hand, folks celebrating, and on the other hand, what is there left to minister to or whatever? I think that for me, and although I've been very involved in it, I was still a member, as you, Barbro, Thomas Jefferson District, or a person involved in districting. And I think another walkout occurred. The walkout of my daughter and her 4 friends.
Yeah.
The invisible walkout. And thankfully, I think we recouped from most of that. Or we're recouping from that. And so I wonder about a lay perspective. Elnora and I were not. We were active lay people, and we were underground lay people.
Mm.
And there was an entire underground of lay people, of lay people of color.
Mm.
And I don't want that to be forgotten. No, I really don't. I love watching you and Janice, Barbro, and your relationship and how it developed and how it grew into, well, it's had such an impact on the rest of us as such. I still struggle and want to answer what's in the name.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want us to get away with changing the name. Now, lots has changed, granted.
Mhm.
But trust me, having 3 people of color as president or co-presidents or whatever we're going to call ourselves, we did have to sort of look at each other, take a deep breath, and basically say, what the hell is this about? No, and I don't think I'm misquoting anybody in that group. I hope I'm not. And I feel sort of strange to even talk about it because when we convene, you see a lot of things happen out of the DJ piece. There was a whole piece of organizing that was happening way before the name even came up.
Oh, sure.
And this put, Wayne, I remember me sitting in your office with, is it Corinne? I won't call her name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Corinne
okay.
Lovato.
Yeah, that was the unholy trinity, but at any rate. But I remember it, but we worked, and we were from 3 very different places, but we worked. I think that the 3 of us really cared about Unitarian Universalists.
Mhm.
Yeah, all now I would say if I said, well, probably you and I were a little closer on that. No, the 3 of us really cared about it.
Mm.
And we thought we would be standing for something that was going to be, I'm lost for words. And it's not my medication, by the way. It's just I'm lost for words on it.
Mm.
So I'm thinking about how do you look at Honora, lay people? What was the impact
Mhm.
that happened?
Mhm.
What really happened in the belly of the General Assembly? Downstairs in the belly of it when we were there and they were put, you were there, Mel? See, I don't remember. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, so well, yes, I was there. I also anticipate, well, that's not, you go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But all I'm saying is I think it was a part of change and how we go about change and how we handle the chaos of that change. And what's the gains that we had for sticking in.
Mhm.
And trust me, we were all in different places.
Mhm.
We're in the same spot in different places. I think the places that, for me at least, it was, here I am, I finally put my trust for the last, I guess it was 20 years then, or 30 years, I don't know, as a Unitarian Universalism. And here we go again, where I've been fooled by religion, period. And so for me, the redeeming thing about this is that it at least brought things to a point that we could name it, we could talk about it, and we could struggle to find words to work with it, or ways to work with it.
Mhm.
Now, I've been known to ramble, and I appreciate you, Wayne. Each time you sort of direct me right back, you're beautiful at it, and And it's not a hidden kind of thing, but I know it is an appreciation. Please continue to do that because it helps me to filter out what is important. But I'm selfish here. I want to know the impact on lay people, on generations to come. My daughter has slipped back into a Unitarian church. Her friends said they're nice white people. And this is right now, not then.
That's
No
it.
matter
That's
who we
right.
have as speakers or whatever else, they always remind her, oh, that's when we went to Charlotte. And they forgot the speakers just about, but they knew about the Thomas Jefferson Ball. And that's enough to keep at least 3 of them away. They do nothing though, that's the interesting part. So I think we lose people who leave, but they don't go necessarily to another religious group or another church community. They go nowhere. I've rambled enough, but I don't know what I'll say, but I'll stay in time and I'll move as the Spirit moves. I'd be nice if Eleanor and I could have a conversation. And once it's decided that she can come, we've had conversations, not about this, but we have had some powerful conversations, particularly since Elandra's passing.
Yeah.
I was going to say, as I listen to all of you speak, there's an element in both what we've been through in the last 30 years and in going forward that goes beyond any form of programmatic, ideas or changes or trainings or mission work or anything like that that's represented in the Commission on Institutional Change. There's an element of all this that's involved with holding and processing trauma. It's pretty deep. I mean, certainly for African Americans, how those buttons get pushed by events when you're in dominant white space, white dominated space, which is what almost all of our congregations are and all of our meetings, is unpredictable. But even on the white side, when Barbro tells her story about David McPherson, I mean, that happens in 1993, and he's right back in 1968, 69, and his trauma button is pushed, and he's reacting out of that place. Whatever white trauma processing means in this context, whether it's about your shame or your guilt or your resistance or when you had a bad experience, in a mixed race setting as a kid, who knows what all the trauma is that gets pushed in all this stuff. I think it's very hard for us to fully recognize that going on as an emotional foundation, in all of this. And we try very hard to, read our books and read our reports and our commissions and act on them and stay in the game that way. But it's very hard to work on the trauma and know how to live with it or express it or and I don't know, I don't think you move past it per se. I just think you recognize it as something that's part of your life. So that's a thought.
Brain, that's so interesting. You see that?
Oh, look at that. Racial battle fatigue. Yeah.
You freaked me out when you said that, and I got up and looked around. This was something that 2 colleagues and I put together for the university in dealing with racial trauma fatigue.
Okay.
They paid us, but they never let us use it. No, I'm really serious. They paid us to do this. And we took the money And but we didn't give them right that we kept our ownership of it. Okay. And definitely it's not going now with all the stuff in critical race theory and all the rest of that. And I think you're on target when you talk about this trauma piece and institutions and how institutions respond, how the trauma starts to develop, what are the preventative kinds of pieces, what is it all about, how it's just I just wanted to share it. You pushed the button.
Yeah.
Because there is such a thing that happens with institutions and trauma.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that's increased. It affects everything around an institution. We may keep the same curriculum, but it's not the same. Thanks for letting me ramble on that. But
Yeah. You know, go ahead, Mel.
Well, I think there's a whole lot of things going on. For me, going back to when we started this work, ironically, I was actually I thought I was going to move into Unitarian Universalism back into the 60s, because coming out of I was no longer Episcopal in my functioning, even though I was at seminary. And Unitarian Universalists had not been brave enough for me before, in terms of, I liked a lot of the language, but didn't see the activity in the community, and in the same way continued from Selma and so forth. But when the Black Empowerment era happened, I said, oh, I think I may have a home. I mean, it looks like folks are really opening the door, and white people and Black folks would say, okay, let's play with this, not just play with this, let's get serious about how we get together. And for the first couple of years, it did kind of look like that. And from the outside, because I'm still not inside, but it was empowered, but it gave me a vision of what was possible, and that this might be a faith that could do that. And then, of course, we know what happened. And I kind of said, well, excuse me. I said, I got enough crazy white folks I'm dealing with now. I don't need some new ones that aren't going to move forward. But I moved into the ecumenical interfaith movement, because during that time, we were able to catalyze a lot of folks who really were committed to the love of God, if you will, and heaven on the one hand, or the love community. And there were segments of us that could join together and almost create a faith within faiths. And Unitarian Universalists individually were on some part of that. Loretta Williams was one of those people that was a real leader in that happening. There were others. I mean, there were people who were part of that who were UUs, but weren't really bringing their congregations or representing Unitarian Universalism, but their voices were there and important, and also impacted people because of the perspective of the faith of Revelation not sealed and stuff. So I say all that because we had impacts in ways we sometimes don't know. But if you look at the three generational, it was the beginning of some of us saying, how do we deal with the fact when white people figure out they're a minority in this country, and that therefore their understanding of power and privilege will be at risk, and their behaviors in the past have been destructive of other people and themselves. And that's laying the groundwork in the 80s for what will happen 40 years out. And when that begins to look at the populations. I mean, this is not new stuff. A lot of us were looking ahead and saying, to be candid, white culture wasn't equipping white people in terms of white consciousness to be able to survive in an authentically integrated society. And crazy, some of us said we need to really try and see if we can make something different and help other white people, to be candid, have a different identity out there, so that possibly some of us might join together and be able to have a positive force when the fear and the trauma hit. A lot of other white people who are going to react or collapse or destroy, because that's what they would think was necessary for their survival and well-being. Well, I don't know if any of you were thinking that in your development time, but we were. And so now, part of what I saw is that as a white faith, there was one of the few faiths that had the possibility of trying to model really transforming, because we weren't locked into a person, we weren't locked into a creed, we weren't locked into that life experiences, painful, good, bad, indifferent, and projecting new truths and incorporating them into people's consciousness and policies and practices actually could change this faith in a way that could change few others. And that if that could happen, however, once you could prove it could happen, and you made the not yet, which was culturally unthought of, or not at least unrealized in our culture, if we could make it real in the culture to plant that flag, then no one could say it couldn't be done. And then the challenge would be who gets on what side of the fence of inclusiveness and commitment and integrity for everyone versus those who are not, which is where we are now. So we were looking at this day way back when. The issue was, how do we get some other people there so that we might find a way to really try and have the battle? What does it mean to be human? And live together to create a world we all are protected in, lived in, and in relationship with Mother Earth. And we're talking, this is what we were thinking in the 80s and saying that we won't know if it can happen until we're out here where we are. And so we've made some of those journeys. And I think, I don't know how many, I'll be honest, because I ain't white. I don't know how many white folks in the culture even understand what's happened to them and the changes that have really gone on, even within our faith. And the importance of that, as I see it, because we've been widening the circle. We've taken ourselves to a place where we've acknowledged white supremacy as, and survived calling ourselves white supremacists, identifying that we're in that category, and not getting stuck there, but moving forward to really try in another way to have an authentically BIPOC constituency, which we've never had before, and to find a way to try and be a intersectional relationship across all the isms. Who else has done that particular thing in the way that we've done it? And I'm just saying, so I want to say we actually been brought to this point to be in the culture, to model something and to articulate and invite others into it. Because who else can do that at this moment in history? And I think in some strange ways, that takes me back to the 60s. And this feels like I'm talking circularly. I am, because the cycle of transform change has been still transactional. We haven't yet broken to the transformational, but it takes 3 generations. And guess what? That's where we are. So the issue is, are we going to be the voices, and the voices of those we're calling our younger folks now for the future? These will either be the people who lead other people into that, or we won't make it. And we'll have to find, we're not going to have a positive way of being able to live as a culture. So I don't want to jump too far, but I'm trying to be descriptive about where I believe things are, and they will go. If we don't continue the path, if we fall back, we retrench and go back, it won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want the ministers to be supportive. I want them to be supportive of the younger ministers. And I'm just trying to think of how that bridge can happen, to say that in our time, we learned some things, we screwed up some stuff, but we made some of the right moves eventually through the struggle that created new floors that we could stand on, and showed us new visions when we got to that floor of what could be, but not yet. And that's the gift of our faith. Now it happens other places in the culture. So there are other people who are beginning to do that in other places. And we need to begin to find a way to connect and catalyze ourselves. We're really putting a stake in the ground that we're either going to be an inclusive democracy or we are not. And a lot of folks who are not religious now even understand that. But how do we connect ourselves and organize in a way where the dominant paradigm that is still in place to be undermined in all candor for our children, our grandchildren? So that's been my question. Is that too much?
Well, it's right up the alley of some of the questions that we've been thinking about. That I know we've been talking right now for about half an hour.
I know.
And this actually, these conversations we've been having convince me that having a relatively spontaneous conversation is the best idea. I'm not sure we necessarily need to structure it much more than having a round of self-introductions, like I suggested in that wordy long 2-page thing I sent you. I think you should each say everybody should say who they are and how they connect with the events in 1993. And then the really, in all those words I sent you, there was just basically two questions, I think. What difference did your involvement in 1993 make, you think, for you personally, but also in Unitarian Universalism? What's important for you in thinking about that time and where we are now? And then the second question is, where do you think we're going? What gives you hope, or what is continues to be a struggle for you? And I mean, if we were to really just divide our time with those two questions, I think all of us could weigh in and interact, and I think self-monitor in terms of how much time we each take in how we talk, and try to be inclusive, pass the ball to somebody else, that kind of thing. And it would be easy to keep it going. I think Barbro has suggested that we have a longer time than 20 minutes for questions and comments from the people who are the audience for this. And so I wondered how you two felt about that. I initially suggested only 20 minutes, but I'm certainly open to a longer time. Do you feel comfortable about having the whole sort of second part after the bio break be thrown open and see what comes out from the people that are listening?
I am.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think basically, I guess the issue is, this is a clarification question. And so are we going to just kind of go around and let folks talk, whoever talk, or if some of them address some things back to us or ask for, are we going to reflect back with them? I'm just, that's my wonderment, because it can go different. That's why I'm asking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's sort of the moderation question, and whether whoever speaks in that time, one of the panels is only going to receive written questions or comments through the Zoom chat, and they will be read by somebody outside the panel, maybe Richard Speck, who often does that in our conferences, and just reads the comment or poses the question, so that we don't actually sort of click the mic on for anybody who wants to talk, but they do have to engage with the chat. So that is one way to sort of control it a little bit. And Richard, sometimes in playing that role, Richard has seen several questions sometimes that are more or less the same. And Richard sometimes has done a good job of reframing or combining questions into one. So it's possible to trust him to do that. Or you could just have kind of open mic and see who wants to talk and what they want to say.
Yeah.
I'm not sure which you'd prefer.
I think that was my question, and that at least
Yeah.
my question. I think on this one, I mean, it's okay to if we're saying, let me go back. So Wayne, the minutes we would talk would be about an hour. Is that within that?
Yeah, it maybe if we at the end of the first hour, it depends on how quickly we can get started and do our little self-introductions around the group of 6. If that took as much as 15 minutes, we'd only have 45 minutes if we were going to take a bio break after the first hour. Is that about right, Barbro? Have I got?
No, I'm thinking that if we allow 30 minutes for people to pose questions or make comments in whatever way we decide for them to do that, we could go for an hour and a half, or not quite, take our bio break before the last half hour. The bio break, I want to be 5 minutes, no longer. If people take longer to get back to us, that's their problem. But I want to make sure that we have a 5-minute bio break with music playing, relevant piece of music playing during that intermission, as I call it. So we have a few minutes at the very beginning of the session when someone yet to be identified welcomes people back to the conference. Right. And then we have the introduction of the panel. And after listening to you, Mel and Leon, I'm thinking that there needs to be a really robust, not long, but robust context. Put the ball in context. I mean, that's what you're both talking about, all the work that went ahead. And then the ball was this moment in time. It was not independent. It was connected to other things. So I'm thinking there needs to be maybe a 5-minute introduction with a brief, robust, put the ball in context for everybody's benefit. And then whatever we want to do with the rest of the time, introduce ourselves, obviously, yes. I'm a little bit leery of the free for all, just because what often happens is that we lose track of how long we speak. I mean, I see it all the time in our small groups. If we don't have a timer, people just don't have a sense of how long they're speaking. So I would want to see something that ensures that everyone, all 6 of us have pretty much an equal amount of time to share what we need to share. And then at the very end, I would like for there to be, you know, at the beginning we put the ball in context. And then at the end, before we throw it open to questions, again, a little bit of context in terms of the continued work that happened. That I'm not sure. I'm kind of a little bit all over the place there, but I think the context piece in the very beginning is important for everyone's benefit. And then whatever we do next is up for grabs.
So Barbara, let me just, it would be helpful.
Yeah.
It would be helpful to me. What are the, for you, what are the 3, 4, 5 things that you think are part of putting it into context?
The underground work that was going on with lay people, what Leon is talking about, what you were talking about, working on leading up to, and the struggle that African American members of UU congregations had been part of for a long time, and that, and also that you know, the empowerment controversy from 67, 68. I mean, that for me is a big piece in context. And that has to do with the trauma that a lot of people experienced at those 2 general assemblies, Black and white. Now, I wasn't there. I didn't come onto the scene until much later. and I came from, you know, you all know, very naive place into the Thomas Jefferson district. But the context for me is a little bit of what happened before and what people have experienced. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah, it makes sense. It's just, I think Nell's question is good. If you're only going to set context in terms of 3 or 4 or 5, you know, key things that you want to hold up that led to 1993, what would they be? When did you start serving on the board, Leon? What year? Do you remember?
No, I don't.
I honor that.
I can answer that quickly. God, it was in the what, Black Concerns Working Group was in 80, what? You know,
5.
85.
85.
Okay, so 84, 85, right after I left the Black Concerns Working Group and moved to the board.
See, besides the Black
Yeah.
empowerment controversy, I guess what I would frame these events in '93 by is the I would hold up the Black empowerment or the whatever we're going to call it. I'm not sure what we call it now.
I was going to say, because I always call it we call it the white mismanagement.
Yeah, I know.
That's part of the issue, because
that's exactly right.
That's why I'm bringing it up, because how people looked at it. What do you call about this? We weren't empowered and we didn't take the money. I mean, we didn't get the money because you all didn't give it to us. And so that's part of what I'm getting at. So we're going to tell the truth. I think we can, and we can laugh about it now. See, Barbara, I heard actually what happened. We were just talking. I learned where you were, because when we were talking, you said, I was sitting with so-and-so and here and in the second one, and that took him back to a place I wasn't, but I knew it was in the room because of what happened. See, that was so natural. I'm remembering when you all did this before, I don't think you had a lot of structuredness. What you did is you started talking from where you were and what shaped you. And somehow it came out to be a fairly powerful experience. Am I correct or not?
Well, somewhat correct. Hope and I had a very structured program, but we did not tell people exactly what they had to say. And some of us did not write what we had to say. And I, on purpose, did not write. I knew what I wanted to say, and I just did it.
And you said it. So why would you think that not work here?
I was also the timekeeper at that point. And for the most part, I think we all stayed on time, but I was paying attention to that part. And at one point, I told someone their time was up, which, didn't necessarily go over so well. Because we needed to move on to make sure that we got our pieces of the program done. And it was Hope, Leon, Wayne, and I, with some audience participation, you and Keith.
And Mark. Mark was there, and Keith,
Mark, as it turned out, yeah.
So we had it not totally scripted, but we had a very definite program. I think I still have it somewhere.
I wouldn't be surprised. So just
I mentioned the board, and I asked Leon about his board participation, because I think in terms of the trauma of the events that happened in '68 and all the way to '76, when the Black Affairs Council wound down its activities, and we had these years until the Pickett administration started of just not wanting to talk about it.
Wouldn't talk about it. That's
And then Gene did the audit of the staff and brought in somebody, I think, from Crossroads or from People's Institute. I forget who did that audit at the beginning.
That was what you call him, up the street. I know if I'm looking right at him. I know.
Yeah. Well, we'll remember eventually. But anyway, we had that audit, and I was still part of the staff. I remember that. I was in my last year as the youth programs director. And that started a ball rolling inside the staff, and that made its way to the board, and the board started to do its work. And that was hard. And gradually this led towards the resolution in Calgary, which was just the year before this, right? 92. Mm-hmm. So we have this resolution that we're all excited about. The white people are anyway. And we've got this statement and we've got this commitment. And then the next year, kabloom. You know, it all seems to blow up in our faces. And so I think in a way that's the context. A lot of, in a sense, small group leadership work, and a bunch of it being white people's work. I mean, Mel was put into, what year did you start at the UUA, Mel, as on staff? 80.
I agree in 87
87, okay.
to become an internal change agent
Right.
to stabilize the current structure. The truth of the matter is, Bill and Kay and I because when Gene asked me initially back in, Pickett had approached me earlier, and that's when I hadn't even transferred my ministry. I was about to, because Rose and I would have given up our right in our faiths if we joined to, they weren't putting women or people of color into jobs because you had to give up your own affiliations up to that. So actually, Mark and Gene approached me about some ideas for, you were on staff then, when they were looking at how can we enhance our ministry. And Gene, you met with some of the couple of black ministers. Also, I had a session and I talked about the fact that you need to have a way that people's livelihoods aren't threatened if they're going to come into Unitarian Universalism unless you're going to promise them jobs. And your structure doesn't do that right now. And so when they asked me, Gene asked me, would I come in? I said, hell no. I said, you guys, I had a great job and a system that was working for me. So I mean, that's what, there's some of the stuff we just don't know. So Rose and I came in 84 because of the principles and purposes, because we said, okay, there's something that a faith can build around now. And over time, people, they called it the suggestions or, you know, whatever. They weren't even principles. I mean, they weren't, we didn't want to, what am I trying to say? Impose people. My mind is just flipped on me, but the language you use, but anyway, the issue was that it wasn't a requirement. That's what I was saying. It was your choice, but some suggestions. People forget this. Now and that's what I'm saying. Here we're going to fight over whether the principle should be retained or not. And some people think, oh, who will be for faith if we don't have our principles? Right then, the last thing everybody wanted. So that's why I'm trying to talk about the historic changes. You look at the scope, the arc of things, we've had huge change, which most people, I don't think, see how radically we've been able to move forward in terms of a cycle of change. So sorry. So in 87, when Kay and Bill approached me, it was because of the Black Concerns Working Group. The 2 years that I was with them, I said I'd give 2 or 3 years there and see what happens. And if we can get some things moving. And be honest, it was Leon and Norma and some of the Black lay people who said,
board members.
We need a Black minister inside the system.
And you were in that role 5 years before that resolution got passed in Calgary.
Well, right. That's because what we were doing.
5 years.
That's 5 years. Because we remember they couldn't use the word race in my job title.
Right.
That's why I was assistant. But I had next to Bill and Kay, in fact, I had the most access to the system than anybody else in history at that moment in time. Because I had authority to be engaged with every staff member, I was a liaison to the service committee. I mean, I don't even go into that, but at that time, I got to meddle and see what was going on and understand how the system worked. That's what I had the opportunity to do. And so it made a difference. And anyway, I'm not trying to.
So this is all an answer to Barbro's question about how to set context in a paragraph or two.
So I'm rethinking that, and it might be better just for each one of us to tell our stories.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Mm-hmm.
I think it'll work. I mean, look, one of us can, if something goes on to let's get a good frame for ourselves. I have, if my story, what do you say, 5-7 minutes or something like that, or is that?
So let me see.
My initial suggestion was 2 minutes to introduce yourself in terms of where you were then and how you connected with the events in 1993 and maybe where you are now. And then the next step is, what difference did it make? to you and to Unitarian Universalism, the events that happened at that time, and that was at least 5 minutes each. That would be, 5 minutes each of 6 people takes a half hour. So if Barbara's suggestion is that we take a full hour for the whole group, we're already with 10 minutes of self-introduction and 5 minutes of a chance to talk. We're already past, a half hour, 35, 40 minutes into the program. And we've got 20 more minutes to have a little more maybe spontaneous conversation about that's a little more interactive about where we go from here before the bio break, and then we throw it open to questions and comments for a half hour. I guess that's the structure you want, Barbro, right? Now I'm okay with that.
The time that we have after taking away the welcoming part and the 30 minutes for Q's and A's at the end is 70 minutes.
70.
That's the time that we have allotted for us. We could do with less and allow more for Q's and A's afterwards if we want. But 70 minutes is 10 minutes each, basically.
Yeah, 70 minutes sounds right in terms of a chance for each of us to self-introduce, and then each of us to sort of make a statement in terms of the question of what difference did this make? And to you personally, or to your experience of Unitarian Universalism. And if each of us had that airtime, then after that, we could be more interactive and spontaneous, it seems to me. And that wouldn't necessarily require a moderator per se, I think, if we just had that understanding that that was how we were going to proceed. I could simplify what I wrote to you guys earlier and make it easier and simpler and as a structure and send it around, and also something that we could show to Janice and to Elnora.
Leon, where are you in this?
That fits for me. That makes sense. It fits for me. It's helpful for me. Okay, and keeping it in context and in connecting.
I mean, the stories that we all have to share involves the before and after.
That's right. That's
So
right.
as long as we all are touching on that, but not going into long sermons about it. And some of us are sermonators.
Yes. There's a part of me that said that's so white.
Yeah, it is. No, there's no doubt about it. That's,
I just have
that's partly why Barbara and I thought maybe we should step back.
As Howard Thurman says, you can decide that you're the.
I know how to do white.
Right, that's right. We can look. I'm clear about this. I don't mean this facetiously. You two invited us to help you in making the presentation, so and I'm flexible. I was glad that you were willing to do it, and so and it's important. What's important for me that actually you all wanted to do, in terms of in a public way. I just wanted to, and I think it gives a chance to help people understand it better with some of the dynamics and dimensions that maybe everybody doesn't understand. And I hesitated at even one point to say, do I want to bring in the context and the larger thing? But on the other hand, I think that's where a lot of other people may be able to learn or be able to buy in and say, or cause them to at least reflect back on it themselves. Because to be honest with you, I worked my ass off and Leo was working his ass off to pass the resolution. And then the damn program committee came up there and threw this, what turned out to be a gift. See, I looked at it as a gift. What most people don't know, that we'd already talked about it, Denny and Natalie. So we anticipated it was going to break up out at some point. We knew Hope was going to do her thing. And my advice to people telling you was, let it happen. I said, let it happen. and find out where we are.
Yeah.
Not because I didn't, I haven't said that a lot out loud, but we anticipated it was going to happen and break out in some way. The issue was to let it happen and find out how far along we are in our capacity to deal. That's my, I'll tell you, I said it to the board, I said it to Kay, I said, and so we said we're going to let it happen. But we met with John and Carol beforehand. I don't know, most people know that. And around the anti-racism stuff and what was going to happen, and that it was going to be part of the day. So most people don't know it was not a surprise to the leadership.
Okay. Yeah.
And people trust the process.
Mm-hmm. So the other piece that really speaks to me that you have touched on deeply is the emotional impact. That's, I think, where the work really happens. Like Wayne was saying, it's not in the programs or the papers that get written. It's in the work that we do and the emotions that we feel, whether that be trauma, fear, joy, whatever. That and I think it's important to keep that in mind when we do our presentations. The emotional.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I loved about what happened before, because you all were real. And I'm saying be real now, because that was the power. And that was what happened when we went downstairs, when that group met.
Yeah.
It got real.
That
we
was
touched each other's hearts.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the most real things I've ever experienced in that circle.
And when we came back up, though, we looked like it was real. People could see, they didn't know what was going to go on when we went away. When we came back, there was something that happened because we radiated importance and connection.
And we held hands.
And we held hands.
We were together.
So that was a very important moment in our history. I mean, what happened if folks had walked out, or folks had left the room and they had to explain why so-and-so couldn't stay in there? When Jack says, "Come to my church," I say, a different response. So that's why I keep saying there are different things that happen in terms of our learning to how to be able to engage and deal with trauma and not let it destroy us or overwhelm us. And I think it's important. We did this with 2017. Look at the response. We could have really gone fractured, but people, you and others, came and knew we could survive this and work to do the weaving and the connecting and let others know that this wasn't going to destroy us.
We announced that there was a beginning too at General Assembly when we came back. And the announcement was very short. And it was basically, now we've begun our work. General Assemblies just started.
Right, I remember that. I remember those words.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah. And for many of us, that was it.
That was the beginning.
Now we're doing work.
And that's why I stayed. I'm serious. Because that was for me, that was my tell. I told him I'd give him couple years, I get 5 years. And then I stretched that because we got the 92 resolution, and then it was the 93. And then I think I said, we got something to work with, and we've got some leadership, but we've got to create a pathway forward for the long haul. And that was the beginning of figuring out Journey Towards Wholeness, believe it or not. It was out of that. All that came out of that.
So,
and it slipped out to say that, actually, that now we've begun to work. Because I couldn't think of what to say other than what had happened. That was the real work. General Assembly happened in the belly of that convention center or whatever it was.
yeah, 13 of us.
Lucky number.
A lucky number.
Yeah.
It was. So I'm thinking that what I would like to see is that we have, by the time the conference opens, a couple of weeks before maybe, we have an understanding of who will go next, so that someone begins, this is after the introductions.
Yeah.
Someone begins their story, and the next person knows that they're next. So that we have that piece in place, and some kind of, maybe I'm being too white. I don't know.
No,
Not necessarily.
well, I was being white too, because I was going to say the order, I think, is important in terms of, like, I think I should be last because I'm going to bring in a larger picture. I think you all, from my perspective, and that you all, again, the two of you, actually the ones inside of Omapa that dealt with this, and Leon, you were the ones in Thomas Jefferson that were most directly impacted.
Yeah, the three of us were in Thomas Jefferson.
That's
Wayne,
correct.
Leon, and
Yes.
I.
Yeah.
Yes.
After we do our self-introductions, what I would love is to see Leon and Elnora talking and engaging in not only a little bit of their stories, but maybe something conversational between the two of them about setting, in a sense, setting the scene for this underground work and what it meant for you to, after what we had been through in the 80s, to come to the General Assembly in your own district and have this be the way it begins. I think that would be a powerful beginning for the sort of, what difference did this make to you, both personally and in terms of you and your relationship to Unitarian Universalism, from that, going forward from that. And then probably Barbro and me in the middle, and Barbro and Janice have, in a sense, a story. It might be a little bit between the two of them, and then you, Mel, last, in terms of what difference did it make to you personally? What do you think of that?
The thing with Janice Marie that is, I think, so fabulous right now, not only is she Hope's twin sister, but she's also at the staff at the UUA, working on this continued transformation into the future. So I would love to have her be able to speak to that at some point. We're also talking about having a reading from Mark Morrison Reed to bring his spirit into the group, and something from Hope to read at some point. Short things, not long things, but some relevant words from both of them. And you already had something from Mark, I think.
Yeah, they were sort of openings and closings, didn't you think about it that way? Mm-hmm. Yeah, good. Yeah, I thought Hope's was a really good opening, and Mark's was a good closing. Pardon?
Leon?
Sorry, Leon.
I'm thinking there's some powerful words from Elandria.
From who?
Elandria. E.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very powerful words about where we are and how we move. They're beautiful. I had them here somewhere while I was working on this other thing.
Well, you can find them. You can.
But I'll find them and send them. But I think it would be very appropriate.
And as a closing,
we can have a beginning reading, an ending reading, and something in between.
A lay reading.
Yeah, something in between before we open it up.
Right, coming back from the break. That's a good idea.
That's not what I was saying.
That's what she was going to say.
I was thinking, but that is brilliant also, to have it at the
to reconnect folks back in.
Yeah.
Not a bad idea.
Okay.
Who's going to have conversation next with Janice and with Elnora?
I will contact Janice and let her know that this recording is available. And I don't know who would be most appropriate to connect with
Elnora.
Elnora.
I'd like to.
Okay.
I think it makes sense to me.
Okay.
We're going to
I
talk
will
about it.
work on a much simplified little description of how we might proceed based on this conversation. And again, just send it around to the four of us initially to for any comment or correction. I'll try to get that done within the next 24 hours. I can do it probably this evening. And so then once we got buy-in to that, we can also share it with Elnora and Janice, as well as this conversation on recording.
Now, Wayne, you triggered one other thing in me in terms of conversations, just a wonderment. And I liked when you broke it down and talked about some of the conversations or some of the dialogue between Leon and Eleonora, you guys, and there's another one, obviously, between Janice and I.
Yeah.
In terms of the UUA and the whole umbrella thing. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
As I'm launching it, I left, but I left in place a lot of people. I helped a lot of people be in place to carry the work. And how that, so I, just another moment that I'm trying to lay the groundwork in some ways that might be a way. And also she was on the bridging of doing the work and watching it get undermined, to be honest. And I can tell you, well, I should let her say it. There were a time or two she was ready to leave the UUA. I'll just put it
Yeah.
if she wants to say that or not, it's up to her. And unfortunately, she did not. And so even though some of us were not in the picture, we were still in support of things to keep people who were going through hell in the system, because if they left, it would have, in my judgment, would have collapsed. So I let them decide how much of those stories they want to tell or not. But see, that's what I meant. See, I think at this age, we can talk to the elders, I mean, some of the ministers, and be honest and try and walk this through, because if people don't understand what really did happen and the linkages and things behind it, and we don't help other folks to understand that who are younger than us.
Right.
I think that's one of the gifts we have to give. I really do mean that. And so that's why I'm saying through the three panels, it really works. Did you, and Wayne, I'll ask you one other question. Did you figure you talked about the last panel. Did you figure that?
Everything is free.
I did. We've ended up, I'm pretty happy with it, with Elias Ortega, Jacqueline Brett from the River Congregation. She's the lead minister there. Chris Rothbauer and Arvid Strawby are going to be the people that are going to be doing the future. They come from a lot of different places in their thinking about this. So I'm getting that group together. So there's just going to be 4 in that conversation on the 3rd day.
Okay, thank you. Arvid was there in the early stages, by the way, too.
Yeah. Well, Elias is an interesting character in this, because I mean, he came in as a convert attracted by religious education for his kids, and there's some
everybody's freezing up. Is it my internet?
It's yours.
You must be on your.
We're all fine.
Everybody else is live. You look live to me.
Okay,
Chris. I don't know if you guys know Chris Rothbauer. He's a young minister in his 30s, in his first congregation. He's in the South. He's in Auburn, Alabama, and he's a white transgender guy who is extremely impressive, I think, in person and in how he handles himself, the social media conversations. And then Jacqueline is delightful. She's a Meadville graduate who I met on the Meadville board, and who's moved into that lead minister role in the large congregation in Durham. So there's a connection there between her and Arvid, and Arvid has written a paper that he's delivering to his chapter this week. That's based on the 2020, I think it was Pew or some other foundation study of congregational life. That is sort of looking ahead into the future about the future across faith traditions. And so Arvid's been doing a lot of thinking about this, and he and Jacqueline are going to be having some exchange together when Arvid presents this paper in that congregation. He's being invited back as minister emeritus to do a weekend with them. So, I think there's some nice momentum there in that conversation.
Cool, thank you. Glad it sounds like it's coming all together. Great.
Yeah, it's coming together. So what I'm hearing is that Leon and
Elnora.
Elnora, I don't know why I always think Elnora
Yeah.
will begin, and then Wayne and I will go next, and then Janice
said no.
and Mel will finish up that part where we're telling our stories, and then we'll go into more conversational mode. Is that what we're?
Yeah, and conversational mode about again in a way, the conversational mode about the future. Yeah. So, and I think that can be much more spontaneous and
Okay.
I'm feeling good about this combination of structure and spontaneity. I think, and giving everybody some airtime at the beginning and then let it fly, and we'll see what happens.
Mm-hmm. All right.
I trust us. So we just do.
All right.
All right.
All right.
This is what I'm gonna do next. I'm gonna contact Denise Marie. I'm gonna make this recording available to her, and I'm gonna let her know that Leon will contact Elnora.
Yeah.
So
Unless
that
she just wants to, but I'm having a conversation with Honora tomorrow.
no,
There you go.
And it wasn't planned around this.
No,
Yeah.
but
Okay, so
Denise Marie and Elnora can talk whenever they want to as well.
Again, we're making an assumption. Leon, let me ask, do you think she might say yes? Because we haven't been asked her, if you talked to her, that she might be open to this. We don't know.
She might be a better thing. She's still doing a lot of grieving.
That's why I want to be sensitive. I really want to be sensitive.
She's doing a lot of it through working.
Yeah.
So this might be another piece that she might take.
That's why I wanted to
helping her to work through something.
But I respect whatever her decision is. So that's
okay. And you'll let us know.
Yeah. Let us know if she says yes. Yeah.
Okay. Fabulous.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll be talking in communication.
We'll see you in April.
Yeah. Bye.